there's so many countries where if you wanted to do some of those things, work on a presidential, you'd have to be like so high up in society. Your parents
have to know
would have
someone.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
And even to open a business, right? This is
Sure.
the wildest thing. Like I get the travel. So I used to travel a lot for the brewery because we sold beer in Europe and we would sell beer in Spain. And I talked to folks over there and they would tell me, listen, it's not as easy as you guys have it in America. It's not just the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
It's just the regulatory side, the paperwork, and you just can't do those things in other places that you can do here. Everyone's always fascinated by that, but to us, that's what America is all about.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't matter where you were born, what your last name is, what your parents did for a living, who they know, any one of us can achieve our full potential in this country, right? And that's why this is so personal, those of us that work at Libre, and for me too. Like, I want, not that everyone's going to have the same journey that I've had, but whatever their American dream, that's what Libre is fighting to protect.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
All right, hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. As 2023 is coming to an end, there have been almost 365 days to work on removing barriers and expanding freedom and opportunity. And we're taking time to look back over the past year in a 4-part series, and we're talking with representatives from Concerned Veterans for America, Libre, Americans for Prosperity, and our very own podcast team to talk about what stories they enjoyed the most, as well as what the organizations have been able to work on this past year. Now, this episode will be the second in our End of the Year series, and today we're focusing on Libre and what they've been able to do in the Hispanic community this past year. We've had several guests on from Libre, including their president, Daniel Garza, talking about the border crisis, to Cesar Grajales, who came on to share his immigration story. And this, of course, was the episode that we won a gold award from the W3 Awards. We're very proud of that. We've also had today's guest on before to talk about how inflation is impacting the Hispanic community. So I want to welcome Jose Mallea, who is the CEO of Libre. Jose, thanks for being with us.
I'm so happy to be back here, Jeff. This is so cool, man.
Yeah.
I get to come back. I must have done something right the last
you
time.
You did okay. Yeah, you passed the last time. Listen, it's so glad to have you back. You were with Libre years ago, and we worked together then. And then, like, one day you just show up, and I'm like, man, that guy's been, like, they must have stuck him in some office and wouldn't let him out for about, 6-7 years. And then there you are, and you came back to be the CEO. So I'm really pleased about that.
Thank you, Jeff. It was always near and dear to my heart, the mission that Libre started with. Tons of credit to Daniel Garza and the leadership of the organization back then for deciding to do something so bold, right? But so necessary. We need a voice that's talking to the Latino community about these important issues. So I was here from 2012 till 2015. I moved on, did a bunch of other stuff, started a craft brewery down in Miami, which you got to visit.
Yeah.
And then, late last year, reconnected with one of our former colleagues. The opportunity was there, and I just thought, man, how amazing would it be to go back and be a part of that movement again?
You've actually lived a pretty cool life. I mean, you and I've talked about some of the things, but you've worked on, you worked on Jeb Bush's campaign. Talk about some of the cool things you've gotten to do.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. And this is, again, not to me, it's a daily reminder. I was lucky to have been born here, right?
Yeah.
My parents migrated here. My dad from Cuba is an exile. My mom from Ecuador. And it was just a really fascinating childhood, kind of seeing both perspectives, right? One family that came here just trying to seek opportunity, a better life, and another family that didn't have a choice but to leave everything behind. And the nearest place, thankfully, was the United States of America.
Sure. Right.
But that upbringing, I was very passionate about just, history and politics as a kid. And then when I had the opportunity to just volunteer in campaigns, I started doing that like so many of us have done before.
Yeah.
First campaign was Bob Dole in 96. And I just thought it was so amazing that a kid from a working class neighborhood called Hialeah, which is right there in Miami, could be so close to something as driving in a motorcade and, staffing people and meeting Gene Kirkpatrick and all sorts of other folks that was really cool. And then from there, I got to work on Jeb's governor's race in 98. Then the presidential election in 2000, which we had to recount, which was a total, nightmare of an episode.
Right.
After that, I came to D.C., was at the Small Business Administration for a year, and then I was personal aide to Andy Card when he was White House Chief of Staff. I did that for almost 2 years. State Department, doing commercial and business affairs. Back to Miami, Chief of Staff to the mayor. Then I started my own business, a little bit of consulting work, but then got into the restaurant business because I love to eat.
Yeah.
Which eventually led to a brewery. And in between that, I was a campaign manager for Marco Rubio in his Senate race. Newt Gingrich's state director in 2012 in Florida, believe it or not.
Wow.
Right before coming to Libre.
Yeah.
And then I left to go work on Governor Bush's presidential campaign in 2015. And then after that, I was like, look, I'm going to go back to just focus on this passion of mine, which is being an entrepreneur, and focus those next 8 years mostly on that business journey, which was a ton of fun. And now I'm back. So,
yeah. What a great story. I mean, that's a quintessential story, right? Of someone, like you said, both parents, immigrants to the United States. I mean,
it's a uniquely American story, and I've been fortunate to travel abroad and been a part of programs where you go on these exchange trips to other countries. Right. Everyone's always fascinated by that. But to us, that's what America is all about.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't matter where you were born, what your last name is, what your parents did for a living, who they know, any one of us can achieve our full potential in this country, right?
Yeah.
That's what's amazing about America. And that's why this is so personal to those of us that work at Libre. And for me too, like I want, not that everyone's going to have the same journey that I've had, but whatever their American dream, that's what Libre is fighting to protect.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many countries where if you wanted to do some of those things, work on a presidential, you'd have to be like so high up in society.
You
your
have
parents
to know
would have
someone.
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
And even to open a business, right? This is the wildest thing. Like I get to travel. So I used to travel a lot for the brewery because we sold beer in Europe and we would sell beer in Spain. And I talked to folks over there that were trying to start breweries. And they would tell me, listen, it's not as easy as you guys have it in America. It's not just the competitive landscape. It's just the regulatory side, the paperwork. And frankly, opening a brewery in America is tough. That's a whole episode. We can bring our colleague Eric Bott in on that one because he's got some war stories from the legislative side. But you just can't do those things in other places that you can do here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So let's talk about Libre. Explain for those who maybe don't understand what Libre is. Explain what Libre does.
Yeah, so we're a grassroots organization, just like AFP, right? With the difference that we have an audience that we're trying to communicate with, and that's the Latino audience across the United States. Now, that is not a monolithic audience. That is a very diverse community. We have folks who've been here multiple generations. We have families that were here before where they live became a state, like in New Mexico, right? We have families that have been there 300 plus years. And then we have folks that have just arrived to this country. Some are residents, some are citizens. So we want to engage with everyone because we want to talk about the values that Libre stands for, right? What we're fighting for, which is these principles of a free society, the principles of human progress, economic freedom, educational choice, what we consider that center-right issue set. And we want to engage with them and educate them. But sometimes really what we find is when we start talking to people, they tell us, yeah, that's exactly what I believe. I just didn't know how to articulate it. And I didn't know how to connect with a group that believes in that too. So it sounds, sometimes people look at us and they say, oh, that must be very difficult because there's this assumption that Latino voters are automatically voting in a liberal, for liberal policies and so on.
Right.
But when you really sit down with folks, you realize what they want are to protect those values that make America so special. The things we were just talking about, being able to start your own business, being able to send your kid to the best possible school. It connects with them. So that's what Libre does. We have 14 chapters across the country. So we've added recently Wisconsin and now Pennsylvania. But we're in 14 states where we have a really robust team of people that are doing all sorts of great work. So we do the traditional grassroots work that you would do to educate folks and do advocacy. But what's unique about Libre is that we also have a Libre Institute, our 501c3, that does a lot of work to build community. And what does that mean? So we want to engage with folks and demonstrate to them that we care, right? By doing these things that removes barriers from their lives. And that could be English classes, driver's license courses, sometimes citizenship classes, financial literacy, you name it. We empower our team to decide what's best for their community, to build these relationships. And then when we do that, people suddenly realize, well, look, these Libre folks, they're legit. They really care about us. And I want to learn more about what they believe. And that's when we open the door to all these other issues and they realize that there's alignment there. And they become our best supporters, volunteers, and sometimes even our staff. A lot of our staff that's joined the team came by way of these events.
Yeah. You talked about the alignment there. You talked to actually struck me how you were just talking about some of the that it's not a monolithic community, right? The Hispanic community is, I mean, there's a lot of difference between a Cuban in Miami and, someone from Mexico who lives in, Arizona, let's say. So that's very different. But I'll tell you the commonalities that I see in the Hispanic community. Tell me if I'm right. Hard work, like the ethic of just hard work, values, generally pretty strong on kind of family values and the importance of family. And those are core things that when I think of America, that's what I think about, right? Is hard work, the ability to come to the United States, work hard and make a living off of your hard work, but also belief in those core values of family, of morality, of faith, all those things.
That's it.
Is that right?
I think you nailed it. And that is again, it's not to say that it's one, it's not a monolithic group.
Sure, of course.
But that is at the core of the community, no matter where you go.
Sure.
And whether it's one generation, 2 or 3, you still have that shared sense of family, sense of, we're in it together. We're trying to do something to help each other out. Neighbors talk to each other. They try to help each other out just like they did wherever they came from. And as a community, I think that's the opportunity that we have, is to engage those pockets that are in some cases in states where they've never really had a big presence before, and try to help them to get organized and have a voice and build on that foundation of faith, hard work, and family. And in other places where they've been for a long time, fight some of these other agendas that are out there that have been trying to change some of those values in the community for a long time. To, one of the scariest things that we've seen, and not to be negative, right, or put some a damper on this, but recently Libre did polling, and one of the scariest stats that we found, and I remember a similar poll 10 years ago where we asked the same question: do you think your children in the next generation will have the same opportunities that you did? Back in 2012, it was like 56%, and we thought that was worrisome. We're like, oh boy, it's more than a majority here. Like more than 50% believe the next generation will not have. They're worried that they won't have the same opportunity. Today, it's 81%.
Wow.
And that's scary, because that's when people start to lose hope. And I think some of that is a reflection of the failed policies of the Biden administration and this terrible economic situation we're in. But not just beyond Biden, kind of what they see with the overspending, inflation, all these terrible things. But also, there is an agenda that's out there. There are these huge organizations that are trying to convince people that the American dream is dead, and the only way to get ahead is by relying on government instead of relying on themselves. And so that's what we're fighting up against. And once we sort of show up, we quickly start to, do away with that myth that they're trying to promote.
Yeah. And that's important, right? For people to understand, for America to survive and to continue to be America, we have to have folks who are reliant on themselves and not reliant on government.
That's right.
And government is always going to be out there kind of fighting that and pushing it and trying to get more people kind of, I guess, addicted to government and government spending. But it's our job, right? It's every American's job, I think, to say, look, we can make it in America on our own. We just need kind of government in some ways to get out of our way and stop creating these barriers.
Yeah, well, we just need the right conditions, right? We just need the right conditions and to be allowed to achieve our full potential. And everybody wants that. That's the beauty of it, that at the core, like you were saying earlier, and I think most Americans want that, to be honest with you. But I do feel that the Latino community, they tend to over-index in that, and you see it historically, largest amount of small business owners, right? Open it at a higher rate than anybody else, which is a huge job creator in these communities, because they want the dream. They want to achieve their dream.
Yeah. Yeah. So Libre this year had a lot of kind of firsts. I know you had a fly in to Washington D.C. But what do you think are some of the biggest accomplishments of Libre in 2023? Because you just started when did you come back?
We started in April, and I saw you like my second day on the job.
Yeah, second day. I'm like, hey, they let the guy out of the office.
Yeah, and funny enough, I remember we collaborated back then.
Yeah.
And, we did a lot of stuff in 2012 and 14. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, man, there's Jeff. I'm glad he's still here.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So you started then. What do you think has been some of the great accomplishments over the last several months?
So one thing that I love about this organization in the 8 years that I was gone is that the sort of foundation that we set back then, and it was early, we were all over the place with some of the things we were doing. We were focusing on different issue sets, but the talent that's been brought onto this organization is amazing. We have incredible people. And I could say that across the board with our whole community, but at Libre, we really have a group of dedicated people who care deeply about their community, and they are willing to fight for that, right? They really believe it. So that's a great start. So what we've been doing this year is thinking about how do we sort of evolve to meet the moment. We have a big challenge ahead of us, right? We have a big challenge in our national politics. We have a big challenge in just the policy arenas, but we also have a big challenge with this community, right? We have a huge amount of new arrivals that are arriving here, some through means that are not the right means, through the illegal immigration that we're seeing. Yeah. And as a community, we need to really get in front of these things. Plus, the Latino community has the highest population growth rate. In those 10 years, from 10 to 20, we represented, I believe it was almost 50% of the population growth of the country. And that's going to continue. So if we think about that as an organization, we realize, okay, we got to lean into engagement. The grassroots stuff works, the advocacy and the stuff we do to promote policy, but we got to think a way to shift paradigm, right? Which is a term that we use a lot in our community. And we need to do that at scale. And so we started to work on a couple of different things. One of them is strategic partnerships with a team that already existed at AFP, and thinking about organizations that we can partner with, where we could find common ground to reach more people and engage more folks, leveraging the reach of those organizations. And the other side is on the media front. We have to really create new content, similar to what you're doing here, Jeff, which thankfully we were able to do a really cool project, which we'll talk about for a minute. But we got to create more content. Libre has to create more content. We got to tell more stories, and we've got to engage people where they are, which is on streaming platforms, on their cell phones, and social media. And I give a lot of credit to the team, our partnership team that supports us, Stand Together Comms and marketing, and Daniel and some of the other folks that we work with that are committed to that, right? And I think they understand that, and we're going through this sort of brand analysis and realignment. We went through a realignment of our vision as well to cast what we call a North Star that was really inspiring and that was really going to motivate us towards that goal that we just talked about, which is helping the the Latino community across the country achieve their full potential, right? Yeah. And I also think that community will be a vanguard towards protecting these values and principles that have made America so special. Yeah. If we do this right.
Right. You brought it up. Because I was going to do it later, but we'll just do it now. We're partnering on American Potential, and there is now a Spanish version of American Potential. Talk about that and how important that is.
I thought this was just awesome. Potencial Americano. I love. By the way, the name translates so well, which is really cool, right? So that was a great benefit. But we got here. This podcast was. I think you had just really started.
Just started in February.
So we were in April, and I think in the summertime, right? Yeah. And I actually give you credit because I feel like you're the one that brought it up.
I'll give it to John quick.
Or John.
John thinks of every good idea for the podcast. We had a call
like
John.
In the summer,
right?
And I remember talking about it. And I had already picked up a couple episodes because I'm just notoriously listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, it's pretty cool. But it just clicked. I said, yeah, this makes total sense. The beauty of it is that we were able to use some technology along with some other support that we brought onto the team to help us. That's doing this amazing translation work, which is really cool. I think it's special because, sometimes people say to me that are native Spanish speakers, it sounds kind of weird because we know Jeff and he doesn't really speak Spanish, but I'm like, yeah, look, we're used to when we're native speakers and we speak English, when we hear translations, we think it's a little weird, but people in Latin America have been listening to, great American movies that sound awful that are dubbed. At least our dub is a little bit better. But I think that the key here, though, is the message.
Yeah.
This message needs to get out there. Exactly what we were just talking about. We need to tell these stories. People are hungry for it. Unfortunately, here, we've been dealing with two major news networks that dominate the debate that traditionally have been on the left. Now, some of them seem to be wanting to come to the middle, but we need to be the ones that are creating our own content and telling these stories to the Latino community. So I think that the potential success in the Spanish language with the Spanish language broadcast Potencial Americano project is even greater than what you've achieved with the English language program. The success you've had this year. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, well, we're excited about it, and I think I've had people ask me about it, and I think what a great opportunity for us to reach out to a whole new community with the message, because the message is the same. Right?
Yeah.
The language is different, but the message is the same, right? That the government creates these barriers. We have to break these barriers down. And if we do, we'll all have a better life because we've done it. And that's the message.
And the stories that you bring are so uplifting and empowering that you can't help but listen to that and feel like, I can be a part of this.
Yeah.
In my own way. Doesn't mean, we'd love for you to come volunteer at Libre or at AFP or CVA, right, but that doesn't have to be the only path. You can be effective by just being an advocate for these issues in your community, by educating yourselves, by doing the right thing when elections come around, serving your best interest, not what some organizer or some community organizer is trying to convince you of. And I think because of that challenge that we have, where there's been a void in a voice that represents these principles and these values, a lot of them haven't heard it before. So anything that we can do, any content that we can create, we're going to get a lot of benefit from that, because the canvas is completely blank right now.
Well, and I appreciate that partnership. We're really excited and looking forward to it. Now, I want to talk about the fly-in. Y'all did a fly-in. First time ever, Libre did a fly-in to Washington, D.C. and to Capitol Hill. Took activists and Libre folks up to the Hill. Tell us about that.
So, I think I can't take, it's funny because a lot of folks have told us, hey, great job and so on. But this was such a team effort that I feel like almost embarrassed to take credit for it, because we have a great team.
Have you noticed, Jose, that like all the good ideas, it's never our idea.
I know.
It's always
we get all the credit. Exactly.
We get the credit.
Yeah.
Well,
so we get the credit for it. But I will say it was our entire team, our federal government affairs team that started this process. They did a great job with the vision. AFP had been doing this for years, right? And CVA, I believe, had done it. So we just took the approach that, look, Libre has something to say about these issues. We also have amazing talent at the state level, our state directors, our Libre strategic directors that are part of our team. And so we brought them all up here, and we didn't really know what to expect. We knew that we were going to get some members to show up. But there were two things that were really fascinating. One, how good our team is. Like I mentioned about the compassion and all that stuff that makes them great, but they were good on the stump. Like these guys were up there, guys and gals were up there just hammering doors. I think we had, I want to say, a couple of hundred meetings with a team of like 13 or 14 people, right? Of states plus us, so maybe 20 of us, but we had a ton of meetings. We exceeded all expectations on that. I might have set the bar low there. It might be even more. But so they were great at that. But then the members responded so well. I had a great meeting with Congressman Style, I believe is how we pronounce it, from Wisconsin. He was awesome. He's got a lot of energy and passion, and he started showing us videos of things that he's done in the Latino community. In his district, I believe it's like 11% suddenly Hispanic vote, which is a big deal in a close race, right, in these swing races. But he's engaging, and when we told him that we were just about to open a Wisconsin chapter, he was ecstatic. And he's like, sign me up. Once you start the chapter, I want to work with you guys. And then other members that were saying the same thing to us, like, hey, how do we get you involved in my district? How do I get you involved in our community? We left some information behind, and then we have members of Congress that took our data from a recent poll we had conducted and wrote op-eds or retweeted it and posted it without us prompting them to do it. So it really validated the work that we've been doing for all this time, and the credibility of the brand and the fact that members of Congress want to work with us, right? It was really encouraging and rewarding to our team as they were knocking on doors. But now what we need to do is build this talent pool, keep doing this work, so that when the climate is right, we can actually, all of us, work together to pass good policy. Yeah.
We've been able to tell some great Libre stories on the podcast. I don't know if you've heard some of those, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on
your gold medal story. Cesar Grajales, man, that guy's a star.
Cesar, he is a star, and that was a great episode. But thinking through some of the podcast episodes we did with some of the Libre folks, which ones are your favorites?
I think Cesar's is very inspiring. Yeah. Cesar is another person that he represents what America's all about, right? When I met Cesar in 2012, he was a contractor. Daniel Garza, who you also did a great episode with, and Daniel.
You call him Dan, though.
I call him Dan.
I can't believe it. I've never.
When I met him, we were working at the White House, and it was a guy named Dan Garza. But I did. So now
you say it now, and everybody's like, "Who's Dan?"
I'm like, "Oh, Daniel, Daniel." But Daniel is just an incredible communicator. His story is so impactful, and I know he talked about what was happening at the border and immigration and those important values. But Cesar's narrative is fascinating. Like Dan will tell you the same thing. The most interesting person in Libre is Cesar Grajales, I think. Just his story of migrating here with nothing, leaving a country that was in chaos due to, socialist guerrillas, right? Like the FARC and all that stuff that was going on. And then taking any job.
Yeah.
Like Cesar just came to work. His family literally had like $50 in their pocket.
They had enough for the hotel room for one night. Yeah.
And they all went out there and worked and found a way to get some money together. And today his parents own their own small business. In fact, his mom just helped me out with some tailoring that I needed with a recent jacket because I've put on a little bit of weight. It looks amazing. So
I'll have to visit her.
Cesar himself has become an entrepreneur. He's got a shoe business where he's making these beautiful leather shoes. Cesar is also a successful musician that, did a bunch of stuff in the music business. So when Dan introduces me to this guy and says, hey, I really want to consider hiring this guy, I'm like, where'd you find him? I've never heard of him. I was an activist in Miami. You kind of know every volunteer. He's like, don't worry about it. He's amazing. Guy comes in. I'm like, who is this guy? Dan met him on a soccer field. Yeah. And immediately, though, he got it. And I was like, wow, he can really express what we're all about, even better than us. And he understands what's happening in the community. So Cesar's story is amazing. I love that. I love that episode. And it was so good that you won a gold medal on it.
Yeah.
Whenever you have Emily on, I love that too.
Yeah.
Because she's the boss and it helps understand the vision and the mindset and where we're going. And,
she did a great job. That is the most listened to episode we had. There have been over 500,000 people who have listened to Emily's podcast.
It's a good episode.
It's amazing.
And it was well timed with everything that's going on. And I think it puts our organization in an amazing position. So, kudos to you and to Emily for doing that episode. But I'm going to surprise you with, I'll tell you my recent favorite episode.
Okay.
Eric Draper, White House photographer.
Was that amazing?
That was awesome.
Okay, so you worked with Andy Card.
I worked with Eric, and here's a funny story.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool.
And I'll shout out Eric, and he'll remember this. We used to, and it's a funny thing. It happens, right? We have similar complexion, similar height, had similar haircuts. And we used to get approached all the time, and people would ask me questions about the White House photo office, and they'd ask him questions about Andy Card.
Is that right?
and all the time, Eric would call me. He's like, "Hey, you need to call so and so." They just, I didn't want to tell him I wasn't you, and I'm like, "Well, don't feel bad because I just got a question about someone about where's their photo," and I'm like, "Why are you asking me this question?" And then Eric and I played basketball together for a little bit, and we were in opposite teams all the time. So I really admire Eric. He's an incredible talent, such a nice guy.
Yeah, right? Super.
But he's been in the room and he's been a witness to history, and his book is amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I really enjoyed that episode, and I was fascinated by it. I love that sort of behind the scenes look at history. I actually would love to get Andy Card on sometime, so I better talk to you. We'd love to do that.
He'd be great.
He would be great.
His path in politics is also fascinating, having served as a legislator in the Massachusetts Assembly there, where he was the minority leader at one point, ran for governor.
Yeah.
And then his story of how he ended up working on the 80 presidential campaign with then Ambassador Bush and President Reagan, who becomes vice president. So he's got tons of stories, plus everything that happened in the Bush administration. I'm sure he could fill more than one episode. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really was. To me, and we're going to talk about what our favorite episodes are with the podcast team. And I got to tell you, Eric Draper was right up there. I mean, that was a fascinating thing. And I met him through Burley Kane, who was the New Mexico state director's
Yeah, because he lives in New Mexico now.
Yeah, he lives in New Mexico. Eric Draper does. Yeah. And he was the wedding photographer at Burley's wedding.
He does wedding photography. Yeah. That was a great
That's how we
team.
came across him.
Yeah, so. Eric's great. And he came and did some stuff with Governor Bush when I was on the campaign trail. So we spent a little time together. When he did his book release, I hosted a reception for him down in Miami. We're still friends, and we every time we see each other, it's a great flood of amazing memories from that really special time.
Next time I talk to him, I'll tell him I met his brother, Jose.
Yeah, his twin brother. His Cuban brother. And it was funny. We make jokes out of it. Like we sometimes even joking around with, continue the conversation with people. Like,
so. That's great. All right. Well, listen, if listeners want to get involved with Libre, how can they do that?
I would recommend that they visit us at belibre.org. That's our website. We also have great social media platforms, which our team is doing a great job. New staff has come in. They're doing a great job with those platforms. So belibre.org, our social media platforms. Engage with us. If you want to, even if you yourself, you might not be Hispanic, but you have friends or relatives or neighbors that you want to recommend Libre to, please do so. And we'd love to get them involved, have them come out to one of our events and see what we're all about.
Awesome. Jose, thanks for joining us, man. It's great. And thanks for your great partnership on the podcast and on so many other things. We appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. All right, so if I get to come back a third time, am I the only?
You do.
How many? Have you had any 3-time guests?
Maybe Drew Klein from Iowa.
That's a good
one. He might be
He's a good one.
up there. I think he's been on 3 times, but we'll have you on a 4th just so you can beat Drew.
Perfect.
If nothing else. Sound good?
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, buddy. All right. The fact that Libre and Jose coming to join us and talk with us today, they're doing such great work in the Hispanic community and elsewhere. And I'll tell you what, I love working with great people. It's one of the great things about working with Americans for Prosperity. They hire amazing people, and you can tell by listening to Jose, he's a good one. He's a good person. He's a good human being, but he also knows what he's doing. He has that passion and love for liberty and for freedom. And he talked about it, coming from his beginnings and his immigrant parents to a country and growing up here in a country that gave him all this opportunity. And he's here to defend that. We need to do that as well. Thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.